Studios.
Welcome back to Laughing in the Dark, the podcast where I hang out in haunted places with comedians. I'm your host, Sarah Jones. This is another fixture in our Minisode series where I get the chance to talk to you about your ghost stories. For this Minisode, I got to speak to a man named Gerald in Vancouver, Washington, about a ghastly encounter that he had in a castle in Sweden. This one's really cool. Here's the Minisode. Take a listen.
This is Gerald.
Hi, Gerald. This is Sarah calling from Laughing in the Dark.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, it's going well, thank you. Taking it easy.
Good, good. I see it's a 503 area code. Are you in Portland, Oregon?
No, I used to be but I've moved across the river. I'm in Vancouver now, so not too far.
Oh, in the Couve. Yes.
So where are you?
I'm familiar. Well, I'm in Los Angeles, California, but the show originated in Portland, Oregon. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Very, very cool. I love having a Pacific Northwest caller.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So you have a good ghost story for me?
Well, I've had two experiences. I don't know whether you'd call them good. I mean, one was there's no real apparitions or anything, just a presence. And the other one, I did actually see something. So.
Oh wow! Okay, well let's start with the first one.
Okay, so I was born in the UK and grew up there, but then started traveling a lot, moved around a lot, and part of my travels took me to Sweden. I was living in Sweden for 8 years. And then do you just want me to go straight into it?
I'm sorry?
Do you want me to just tell you the story now, just go straight into it?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Whatever you feel comfortable with, yeah.
Okay. Well, I was living in Sweden in the town of Örebro, which is just a little west of Stockholm. And I had a very good friend there, a Finnish guy. We used to hang out a lot, do pretty much everything together. We shared a lot of interests. And at the time, we were both living in small apartments. We decided that if we pooled our resources, we could get a bigger place and just share an apartment or a house together. So after looking around, we did find a house, and it seemed perfect. It was a large house. There was standing in a large garden with lots of fruit trees and different flowers and stuff like that. And it was a very big house. And the owner was an older widow, a woman. And she lived upstairs, and it was completely separate, own entrance and everything else. And she was going to rent out the bottom of the house. So we went and took a look at it, and it had a large living room, it had two bedrooms. One of them was very large on the corner of the house, with big windows on two walls. And then another medium-sized bedroom. There was a hallway, a kitchen, a bathroom, everything else. And the rent was very low, and it was perfect. It was just a little ways from downtown Örebro, so it was just the ideal situation.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it was. So we decided to take it. And then both of us, my friend, his name was Esko and I, we both preferred the larger of the two bedrooms. And I can't remember how we decided. I think possibly we might have tossed a coin or something.
Right.
But anyway, I won whatever we did, so I got that room. The two bedrooms were not furnished, but the living room was ideal. It was a strange configuration. You entered the house into the hallway. To the left was the kitchen and dining room and the bathroom, and then you entered from a second door into the smaller bedroom, and you walk through that into the larger bedroom, and then through that into the living room. So it was a somewhat strange configuration. But the living room was perfect. It was the only thing that was really furnished. It had big leather sofas and it had built-in bookcases all the way around, full of books. So it was just a great music, relaxation, reading room. Anyway, I won the toss and got the larger of the bedrooms. And so we moved our beds in and everything else. And for some reason, I had urge to put my bed in the center of the room, not up against a wall like one would normally do. I placed it there. I had a queen-size bed. I placed it in the center of the room, and we started to live there. And at first, it felt just a little uncomfortable. You know, some places are really welcoming. You immediately feel at home and relaxed, and it never quite felt like that. And at first, I just put it down to being a new place. We're quite used to it, yeah.
Sure.
But I never had a good night's sleep, and always restless, always had bad dreams. And then increasingly over the time, we were only there a few months, because over as the days went on, that feeling of unease and being uncomfortable just increased. And I spoke a little to Esco about it, and he said no, he said he might have felt a little bit there, but certainly nothing like I was feeling. But it got so bad in the end that I didn't want to stay there. It got to the sense that I felt somebody. It was always colder in that room. The house was centrally heated, like all of them have to be in Sweden with the cold winters. But that room was always colder, and I had an increasing feeling of being watched, of some sort of presence being there, although there was nothing I could ever see. And it just got very, very uncomfortable. I couldn't sleep very well.
Do you remember any of the nightmares at all?
Any of the what, sorry?
The nightmares. You said you had bad dreams. Do you remember any of them?
Oh, no, I'm afraid I don't.
But you would just kind of wake up terrified.
Yeah. And I would wake up in a sweat, and it was just extremely uncomfortable, but nothing tangible, but a feeling of being watched, of there being a presence there. And Esco began to say, well, yes, he could feel it, but he could certainly feel the difference in temperature in my room. And we would walk through and spend the evenings in our living room, either reading or we put our stereo system in there. He said he would feel uneasy walking through the room. Anyway, it got to the point. I mean, we were both in our 20s, and so we were both dating various women and going out and having fun. Sometimes together, sometimes going our own way. But it got to the point I was so uncomfortable in that house and starting to get a little frightened. I didn't want to be there when he wasn't there. So if he was going out, I went out. I mean, normally I would just sit home, read, listen to music, or do something, but I couldn't do that. If he was going out for the evening, I went out. And I would wait. This is back before cell phones, so I'd say, well, what time are you coming home? And, no, I'll be home by 11. So 11 o'clock I'd come back. If the lights weren't on, I wouldn't go in the house. And it was cold there.
Yeah.
I would wait outside until he arrived, and I'd say, oh, I just got back too. Yeah, and we'd be walking together.
Oh, wow.
And it just kept getting worse. In the end, there were several nights I either slept in the living room on the couch, or I went into Esco's and I said, this room there's something wrong with this room, so I'm going to sleep on the floor in your bedroom. And he said, well, that's okay. So, but anyway, going back a little, prior to getting very, very uncomfortable, it just wasn't feeling right, is a tradition. I told you Esco was Finnish. His mother was something of is the wrong word because that has negative connotations, but she was from rural Finland, and she was a healer. She would heal people. She could tell fortunes. She was the village person that everybody went to. And part of the tradition Finnish approach to housing, when you get a new place to live, is that somebody will come and bless the house for you, and not in a religious context, but just to give you good wishes and to bring a housewarming gift.
Right. Okay.
So she came over one evening, and she got to the door, and we opened the door. We were expecting her. She said she was on her way. She opened the door, and she said, "Oh, I'm not coming in." She said, "This house is not right.
Whoa.
You shouldn't be here." And she said, I can't come in. And she gave us the housewarming gift and left. And we could never convince her to come and visit us. She said, "No, there's something wrong with this house." Anyway, then, as I say, that was fairly early on when we just moved in. And then these feelings were getting worse and worse. I ended up sleeping on the floor in Esco's room occasionally. In the end, we decided that we just had to leave. And at no time did Esco feel the strength of the things that I was feeling, but he was aware of something being that.
Right. Okay.
So we went up to the owner who lived upstairs. As I said, she was an older woman, and told her we had to leave. And she said, "Oh, I thought you might." And I said, "Oh, what?" And she said, "Well, previous tenants have never been able to stay very long either." And so we started talking to her because we developed a friendship with her. And she told us that her husband, she was Polish, as I might have said. Her husband was also a Polish man, and he was an artist. And he suffered from depression and some mental disorders and everything else. He was semi-famous, so they made a living off his art. I mean, he's got an international name, or wasn't. But anyway, he had committed suicide. And he'd committed suicide in that room that was my bedroom.
Oh, man.
And when talking to her more, and she said, "Well, yes, we always had the house divided. We would both live upstairs, and downstairs was his work area. So all the books and everything in the living room, he put the bookshelves in, and most of them were art related. And then both Esco and I dabbled in painting and things. So I mean, it was the perfect room for us. But the room where I had decided that I had made my bedroom, I had decided to have the bed in the middle of the room, not up against the wall. That was where he painted all the time. And he was known for painting huge canvases that could barely get through a door. And he would lay them in the center of the room on trestles and walk around them painting. And that's where I decided to put my bed. And I said, I've never had the urge to have a bed in the center of a room before. It's not very practical.
Right.
But that was exactly where he would have his trestle set up, and where he would have his paintings lying as he worked on them. And as I say, they found him just lying there. No, he wasn't working on a piece there, but he had committed suicide. She didn't tell me how, but found him lying in the middle of the room there. And so she said, "Well, I can understand that you want to leave because other people, I've rented this out before, and people have never stayed long. They've always complained about there being something there."
Interesting.
And so, as I said, I never saw. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Toward the end, things were getting worse and worse, and there would be noises, bumps. At one time, some books fell off I had a little table in there, a little desk to work on. The books would fall off there, but it was just an overall extremely uncomfortable feeling. As I say, no apparitions per se, but just not a good place to be.
And clearly not the first person to feel that way. Well, you know what?
No, we didn't ask how many. She said previous tenants, so I assume
the fact
that
she just wasn't really that surprised. So what I start thinking is, I know that you said that her husband suffered from depression and some mental disorders. I wonder, though, if something wasn't already in that room before her husband that led him to commit suicide.
Wow, I had never thought about that.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like, because, while you were in there, you're having nightmares. It was like a dark feeling, and it was really contained into that room. There could have been something beyond that man.
It could well have been. I had never actually thought of that. I just assumed it was all related to him. But if he was suffering or borderline mental disorders anyway, and there was something there that would certainly account for pushing them over the edge.
Well, no kidding. Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially too, because like you think about someone taking their lives and like clearly his wife still lives there. If you think it's like a conscious entity, you would think that it would be sad. You know, it would be a feeling of sadness, not a feeling of fear. Is what I would think.
That's true. Yes. Yeah. You know, I never thought of that before, but yeah, you could well be right.
That's what I think of. Yeah, like it's almost like a portal or something.
Yeah, indeed. But anyway, as I said, we moved out.
Yeah, probably
and
for the better.
We were a lot happier for doing so.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you said you had another experience where you actually physically saw an entity. Yes,
yeah. And then this is a totally different place and a totally different circumstances. I mean, and it wasn't the sort of feeling. Most people, if you say, "Oh, I see a ghost," you think, "Oh, you're scared," or something's, you know, it's terrifying or threatening, and it was none of that. But I had since left Sweden, and I work in film and video production, and I'd gone back to the UK, and I had a job first of all with the BBC, and then after that with Harlock Television, which is the Welsh independent station. Excuse me. And so I was working for them as a cameraman. I was working in their documentary unit. And we were working on a series called Little People, which dealt with cultures within larger cultures. For example, I mean, the first one we did was, obviously, I'm a Welshman. Mm-hmm. We did Wales, and the Welsh living under the umbrella of the United Kingdom.
I'm part Welsh too, actually. I'm Irish and Welsh.
Okay.
Yeah, my heritage is, my dad's whole side of the family is from Ainsley.
Oh, okay. We were traveling Europe. We had been to Spain and had worked with the Basques. We had Wales, obviously. We had eventually, a little later on, we came into the Pacific Northwest and dealt with some of the Native American tribes here living under the umbrella of, you know, Washington. Mm-hmm. So it was a whole series. So one of the locations we went to was on Corsica, and it's the island in the Mediterranean, and it's French. It belongs to France. The inhabitants there have French passports, but they don't consider themselves French, or at least most of them don't. Most of them consider themselves Corsicans, and there is a free Corsica movement. They're looking for independence. I don't think it'll ever happen, but anyway, that was the culture that we were looking at and doing the documentary on. So we went to Corsica for 2 weeks. And my producer had made contact with an old Corsican family. It was dukes, somebody or other, and they had a big ancestral home up in the mountains in Corsica. It was almost a castle. He called it a castle. When I think of castles, I think of turrets and drawbridges and things like that.
Right.
It didn't have any of that, but it was a huge house.
Like a mansion.
And yes, yeah, and very old, several hundred years old. And it was on the edge of a cliff. So the one wall of the house literally just was an extension of this vertical cliff face. It was literally perched right on the edge.
Wow.
So anyway, this duke, and I don't remember his name, lived on the mainland in France. But would go over there on weekends and things like that. And he said, "Well, you can stay at our castle." As I said, he called it a castle, but and he said, "You can stay there." And he said, "I've got contacts." He was very much a very strong Corsican patriot and wanted independence and everything else. So he was able to put us in touch with a lot of different people. And so we were working, and the good thing about working with British stations is not like over here where you work 15-hour days. You work 8-9 hour days, and that's it. So, you know, you had the evenings. Excuse me.
It's okay.
So we would finish our day's work and we would sometimes hang out with people that we've been talking to and have dinner with them. But most of the time we would go back to the castle and there was a cook there and we'd buy stuff and we'd take it back and she'd prepare it for us. And we just a big communal meal. And a lot of the times, not every night, but a lot of the evenings, the Duke would come and join us. And we'd just sit and drink wine and chat. Anyway, we all had our own bedrooms, obviously. We were a crew of about 8 people.
Yeah.
And my bedroom was a little removed from the others. So at the end of the day, we'd get back to the castle, go to our rooms, freshen up, get changed, and then walk back down. I would walk back down to this big communal kitchen dining area, and I had to walk down this long corridor. And it wasn't dark, but it wasn't perfectly lit. It was the typical old stone narrow corridor you'd find in a big old mansion. You know?
Yeah, it sounds gorgeous.
And yeah, it was. I mean, Corsica and everywhere. That whole country is just gorgeous. But anyway, I would walk down every evening, and halfway down the corridor on the left was a large, I guess you could say it was a utility room. There was an opening into the room. There was no door. It was just a large opening. It didn't look as though there'd ever been a door there. And almost from the first night, I would walk by, and in my peripheral vision, I could see a woman in there, dressed in red, typical Victorian high neck right down to the floor with a bustle on the back and everything else. And I would turn to look in, and I think, well, there's somebody there, and there was nothing. And I continue. That was just a trick of the eyes. So I would do that every day, every evening, the same thing. I'd walk by and I'd see her. And the one time I stopped, I could still see her in my peripheral vision. And I slowly turned, and she was there. She was in the room. She was probably late 20s, quite a pretty woman, but she just looked unhappy. Not tragic, but just unhappy.
Sure,
and I thought I heard something, so I looked back into the corridor, turned my head back to the room again, and she'd gone. She wasn't there. And then from that day on, every time I walked by there in the evenings, I would see her peripheral vision, but never did I see a full vision again. Only that once did she appear. But anyway, one of the evenings, just sitting around with the Duke and just chatting, and I said, "Is this place haunted? Is there any? Do you have any ghosts?" And he said, "No, nothing like that." I said, "Nobody's ever reported anything?" No, nothing. He obviously didn't want to talk too much about it, and I didn't push it. And like I said, when I saw this woman, she wasn't threatening, and I didn't feel scared. It was just like looking at a person. She was very, very real. It was almost if I could touch her. She was a little too far away, but it wasn't a shimmering apparition or anything. It was a solid woman.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the last evening, the Duke said, "Okay, you're heading home tomorrow. We're going to have a nice party. We'll have a big dinner." We invited a lot of the people who had been interviewed in the different freedom groups. They would all come over, and he invited his wife. And as I say, he lived on the mainland mainly. So he said, "Oh, my wife's coming over." So anyway, we all gathered that last evening and chatting. I started to talk to his wife. Turns out she was Swedish. Well, I speak Swedish, so I immediately wanted to brush up on my Swedish and told her I spoke. She loved the fact that I could speak to her in her own language.
Mm-hmm.
So we just sat there chatting. After a few drinks, and I said, "Is this place haunted?" She said, "Oh, you mean the lady in red?"
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, yeah, that's Great Aunt Bertha." And I said, "Well, what's that?" I said, and I told her what I'd seen. She said, "Oh, yeah, people see her there all the time." And she, again, was a troubled person who had committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
And she said, "Come on, I'll show you a picture of her, a painted." She said, "Come with me." So she took, and we went down the corridor that I walked every day and into the bedroom that I was staying. She said, "This," and I didn't tell you this, but my bedroom had a large window, and it was on the wall of the house
face
that was on the edge of the cliff.
Right.
So when you look out the window, you had a several hundred feet drop.
Oh,
she said,
God.
"Well, this is where Aunt Bertha lived, or her bedroom." And, she jumped out of the window. And she said, and that, and she pointed to a big oil painting over the bed. She said, that's Aunt Bertha. It was one of those typical ones. She certainly wasn't in red. She was painted there. And she was a typical painting, oil painting from hundreds of years ago where it's very dark and blue and obviously the dirt and everything over the centuries that accumulated. So it was very dark, and I hadn't really paid any attention to it. But I looked at it and I thought, oh yeah, that is the woman I saw.
Oh my gosh.
So, and again, I mean, and that's it. I mean, that's the story. The next day we went home, but the Baron refused, or I wouldn't say he refused, but he just said there was no knowledge of any haunting. But his wife immediately said, "Oh, you mean the lady in red?"
Well, maybe he must be like a non-believer who like brushes it off or something.
It could well be. Or maybe he just didn't want rumors going around about his home, his ancestral home.
Sure. Yeah, it could make him uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You have bad luck with staying in rooms where people kill themselves.
Yeah, I know. It's a good reason I live in the States now, because here they have to tell you.
You know what? I think that is untrue.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
I've been, so this is my third season of doing this show, and I've talked to a lot of people that have lived in haunted homes, and I've learned that I think what it is that if someone dies in the home, I think they have to tell you if you ask or something, but I know for sure they don't have to say if it's haunted, because there's no way to prove it unless you're in Louisiana. Because
oh, really?
Yeah, in New Orleans, they will post a home and then they'll put at the bottom whether it's haunted or not haunted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then, just for your reference, I guess. And then, so I think it's state by state. So every state has their own different rules.
Okay.
But I don't know if they always have to tell, because I know I've had some callers that say, yeah, I had no idea someone died in the home. Nobody told me. I thought the same thing. I thought you were supposed to tell them. But yeah. And then you think about it and you're like, well, I guess it makes sense. Most homes have probably had someone die in it,
Well, that's true. Oh, I think maybe I was confused there. I think California has a law where if there's been a murder in the house, you have to tell them. Am I right? Do you know?
I don't know. And I live in California, and I don't even know. I'll have to check. Because, I wonder. Yeah. So, obviously there's lots of homes in California that are notorious for murders, like with, Charles Manson and all of that. But, I don't know. And then it comes to suicide. Was that considered a murder or not?
Yeah, indeed.
So that's what's interesting. But, I have no idea. That's interesting. I'll have to, just for my own curiosity, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, indeed.
But, so you're saying in Europe, you don't think that that's a problem, especially with like centuries old like mansions and castles. It's like, of course, there's dungeons down here. Like, obviously, people have died in this.
Oh yeah. No, there's no law like that in Europe.
No.
And I'm sure. You could find somebody that had a ghost story for almost anything. Because I grew up on a dairy farm in Wales, and obviously they've gone through a lot of renovation. The original build was a monk's resting place that dated from 1000 AD, so it was 1,000 years old.
Oh my God.
So, they'd have gone through extensive renovations, obviously, but there's a lot of old buildings in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure they all have history.
Thank you for your call, Gerald. This story was so vivid and so much fun to imagine. Thanks for sharing. If you have a ghost story, we want to hear from you. Email us at litdarkpodcast@gmail.com and tell us your story. We may want to feature you on the show. As always, thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time right here on Laughing in the Dark.